Perfect. Hello, thank you for joining me. This is Nikki from My Healthy Beginning, and today we're going to be talking about gluten-free, the healthy and easy way. Gluten-free is like a rabbit hole, easy to get stuck in and easy to get confused. So I'm going to go over some 4 main topics for you. We're going to talk about what to look for in terms of gluten-free, where to shop, how to shop, some money-saving tips, and then little baby steps to just get you moving in the right direction. Now, what to look for. So gluten is actually the protein in wheat. So sometimes you'll see products that say wheat-free, sometimes you see products that say gluten-free. I would go for, like, you doesn't have to say both wheat-free and gluten-free, but just because it's wheat-free doesn't mean it's just gluten-free, if that makes sense. So ultimately you're going for a gluten-free label, but if you are concerned about wheat, which is an inflammatory grain, you'll just want to look at the label. And if it says wheat, then you would go ahead and just avoid that food altogether. But ultimately, you're looking for the words wheat, you're looking for white flour, even enriched, like just enriched flour is a little bit tricky for people because it doesn't say the word wheat. And so they're just not thinking like flour equals wheat flour or white flour. Einkorn flour, even if it says sprouted something flour or sprouted something bread, at the end of the day, all of that is glutinous or gluten containing. So it's tricky, and label reading can be really tricky, and words can mean different things, and gluten can be found in all kinds of things. So when you hear me say wheat and white flour and enriched flour, einkorn flour, sprouted wheat, probably you're not thinking of sauces, and you're probably not thinking of your condiments in your refrigerator. What are other sneaky things? I mean, even granola bars, cereals, it's really hiding everywhere. And so it can be a very overwhelming conversation for someone to be looking at taking on gluten-free as just a first time step. And it even can be overwhelming if someone has kind of like, I've been there, done that for whatever reason. I went back to eating it again. And now here I am standing on the doorstep of that again. And I'm just even more overwhelmed than I was before. I will say that with our oldest being 16, we've been eating solidly gluten-free for over 12 years. 12 is our middle, and we fully had to go gluten-free by the time she came around. So we've been at practice with this for a really long time. And there are times where I still will mess up on something, or I will still just wrongfully assume something. So you're not alone in that. There are sometimes just mishaps, and, been there, done that. Beer has gluten in it. Like, unless you're buying a gluten-free beer. So it's, you might be like, oh, I've been doing so great, and I've just been doing so awesome. I'm so proud of myself, and I just can't figure out why I'm not feeling well. And we'll start talking a little bit about your day and your week, and you'll say like, oh, it's this really great beer my friend brought me. And then the light bulb goes on. So that can be the case for an adult. Little crackers and goodies and snacks and treats, and going to grandma's house. I mean, as much as the nanas and the omas and the grandmas love our kids, it took a really long time to train our parents as to what were appropriate snacks in terms of what was gluten-free and what was not. So those are the things that you're going to look for. You're not going to find gluten in your cheese. At least you shouldn't find gluten in your cheese and dairy products, right? But you might still look at the label. You're going to find gluten more in your breaded products, your flour products, your baked goods, your cereals, anything that you're kind of buying in a box when you're in the grocery store, your granola bars, you're looking at those. Crackers and chips are big for gluten. I'm literally just picturing walking down the grocery aisles just right now. Baking mixes, of course, unless it specifically says gluten-free. Those are a place to look. Here is the other thing to look for when you are looking for a gluten-free item. So say you decide that you're going to make the move gluten-free and you're going to take a baby step, and you have decided you will start with, say, your breakfast items like pancakes and muffins and waffles like that. And so that there are baking mixes available at just about every grocery store, including Target, including Cub. I mean, every grocery store these days, you maybe not like a little podunk small rural town, but more and more and more, even when we are out and about driving, you can find gluten-free things just about everywhere that are packaged, if that's the way you're going to go. But the thing to watch out with those is when you're looking at the ingredient list, often you're going to find the first ingredient is sugar. If not the first three ingredients is sugar. So one of the things they've done is like they've had to make up for texture and taste by pulling the gluten out, and sugar is like sugar and potato starch or something like that, or brown rice flour are going to be one of the first three ingredients that you see. So just a little tidbit, most people are taking into consideration a gluten-free diet due to inflammation, due to some kind of illness, due to wanting to reverse something, work on something, see a decrease in something in themselves or their children in regards to health or behavior, right? And you want to think a little bit bigger than gluten. So when you're going to take gluten out of your diet, and we reach for those things that are mixes and they're in boxes because it's super convenient and it is a baby step. So just hear it like that. But you're going to see sugar as the first or main three ingredients, and you'll start eating it and you will probably feel better for a little while simply because the gluten is out. So you're decreasing that inflammation right off the bat. But often what I find is if people aren't going gluten-free like the healthy way, what happens is within a few weeks of feeling better. So like they have that break, I'm starting to feel better. I'm starting to notice the difference. I don't have my headaches, or I'm sleeping better, or I don't have as many hot flashes, or the rash in the kids is going down, or the behavior seems to be calming down. We went to the cabin for the weekend. We had this, we had that, we had more sugar, and then everything ramps up again. So sugar is kind of your next, hidden. I mean, we always say around here, sugar is like the first place to look. But let's say second in the world of this gluten-free conversation that we're having today. So where to shop for gluten-free items? You don't have to just go to a natural foods co-op or a Whole Foods anymore, which is so fantastic. Our Trader Joe's, our Coburn's, our Super Value, our Cubs, our Targets, Walmart's, right? So all of these stores now carry gluten-free items. And more importantly, even the Targets and the Walmart's as being and the Sam's Clubs and the Costco's, gluten-free aside, gluten-free the healthy way would mean we're not relying so much on these packaged and processed and convenient foods, but that we are relying mostly on just whole, real foods. So that's what we're thinking about. If we're taking gluten out, I know the look on people's faces when we have to start talking about gluten. They're like, so that means you're taking this much food out of my diet and you're leaving me with this many choices. Like I only have these choices right here. And that's not the case at all. It's actually exactly the opposite. You have like the moon. You have so many foods to choose from when gluten-free needs to be where you put your attention. And it really is only a few foods or small little groups of foods that you need to avoid if you're avoiding gluten. So it's just a little bit of like, how are you looking at it? How are you taking it on? And are you biting off more than you can chew? So backing off, going about it really slowly, being strategic. We do some coaching around here around nutrition. We do nutrition response testing. And so we can literally coach you through exactly what food needs to go and why, and more importantly, what to replace it with in terms of getting that nutrient density and healing into your body. So it is less about what needs to be removed and more about what are you going to put in its place. So if we're looking at where to shop and we're looking at like what to look for in terms of gluten-free, so here are a lot of options that you have. Every vegetable and every fruit is a go. None of those things have any gluten in them. There are a whole bunch of non-glutinous grains. So like your rice family, there's no gluten in there. There's no gluten in buckwheat. So don't get hooked by the wheat at the end of that. It's totally different deal. So like quinoa, buckwheat, rice, wild rice. So you really still have options. Oats. I would say for oats, make sure that oats are like a certified gluten-free, like Bob's Red Mill carries a really great certified gluten-free. The reason I say that is I see people get tripped up if they have a gluten issue and they're, just eating like Quaker oats or something, just for example, and they still test for oats all the time. So the minute we have them change to a certified gluten-free oats, really what that tells me is that person's just very, very sensitive and probably are getting like hooked on, what's showing up in the manufacturing or the packaging or the plant, that everything was put together in. So go to gluten-free oats, your rices, your quinoa, your buckwheat. Those are all gluten-free. The other ones that are gluten-free are like your potato starches, your arrowroot starch, your tapioca starch. So you can be using those in your baking, your coconut flour, your almond flour, your tiger nut flour. I mean, we could kind of talk ad nauseum about what's available for baking that way. But those are some of the things that you would look for to replace where you would be seeing gluten. If you were looking for how do I replace a thickening agent, say for that cream of wild rice soup that you love so much, I usually use like a tapioca starch or an arrowroot starch. And here's the ticket to making that happen. Mary, I know this one is probably one that you would be interested in hearing. So say you've got your big pot of soup going, you've added the rice even already. What you want to do is take out maybe 2 cups of the broth out of your big kettle and just put it in a smaller pitcher or a smaller bowl. And then you want to add tablespoon by tablespoon. I mean, to be honest, sometimes I'll just start with like 1/4 of a cup of tapioca starch or arrowroot starch, and you want to whisk it in. And the reason you want to whisk that in is because the tapioca starch or arrowroot, whichever one you're using, will kind of gel up, and you'll end up with these little globules. They'll taste like gelatin, kind of, like a little ball of gel, and I guarantee nobody wants that in their soup. So you do need to whisk that in pretty quickly, and then you can keep adding more of that starch or flour until you get that smaller bowl to the thickness that you would like. And then you put that bowl back into the main kettle, stir it all in. If it's still not as thick as you'd like, then you take another 2 cups out. So that's how you would build that in to replace, say, the flour that you're putting in tablespoon by tablespoon into that whole vat of soup. Now, I can see some of you might be saying, well, somebody who's gluten sensitive out of a big pot of soup that's got, maybe 2 or 3 tablespoons of flour, they would just be fine. I don't know why that would be a problem, but that's not actually the case. Some people are so gluten sensitive that it comes down to the crumb. It comes down to being in the room with that food or being in a close environment with that food. We've had people here at the practice who were like, okay, so I'm kind of getting a picture that gluten's a problem for me, but still sat down with a bowl of mom's soup. And then as soon as they were done eating, they're hightailing it to the bathroom with the gastrointestinal emergency because they got hooked by that gluten, by that very little amount. And then mom feels really bad because she was like, oh my gosh, it's this large pot of soup. And I literally only put like 4 tablespoons in to help thicken it. So you can see how inflammatory that can be to some people. So those are some tips on what to look for and kind of things to trade out. The where to shop we covered. Nowadays you really can rely on a lot of those online stores. You've got Vitacost, you've got Thrive Market. What am I missing with online? Well, there are so many little stores, even like kind of the mom and pop stores that are online that mill their own flours and things like that. So really you could just do a Google search for your gluten-free flour and you'll just get a ton of options. So just imagine where we would be, you guys, if we didn't have the internet to share all this information. We'd still be like on our buggy and horse riding across the prairie to share with Mrs. Anderson down the way, right? Think of how long that would take to pass this information. How to shop is also really pretty important. We have come to a place in our family's health where I can purchase flours from like the big bulk section at Whole Foods or a co-op just fine, and we don't have any gluten like cross-contamination reactions. But some families can't do that. And certainly buying in bulk in that way is much more cost-effective. So it's a great place if you can get to that space, then that's really awesome. If you can't do that, when you walk into any grocery store, you will notice, if you haven't already, the grocery stores are very commonly set out the same way. You are walking in, and whether you go right or left, you're probably hitting up either like butcher or deli or produce on either side. So let's just say you walk into your grocery store and produce is what you hit first. So if you think about it, that's the majority of what should be going into our cart. So filling up on all of the fresh fruits and vegetables that you need for the week. You might even hit up like some nuts and seeds or dried fruits along that way. So you might grab some of those really healthy carbs and fats and proteins there. Probably then you'll round the corner and find your dairy options. So you could grab your eggs. If you can do dairy, I definitely recommend whole fat dairy products, cottage cheese, whole milk plain yogurt, butter. I mean, if anyone wants to make my day, they could buy me a $9 roll of butter. It's just like my favorite thing. Anywho, let's stay on track here. So your yogurts, okay, your things like that, and your milks and your milk alternatives are going to be kind of what you hit up next. Now, also you're going to hit up some of those cold packaged items. Sometimes that's your hummus and your sauces, like your salsas, perhaps. Sometimes your nut butters will be there. Also really great fresh options to choose for. You may end up with like, oh gosh, your non-dairy, but like really non-dairy. So like your nut milks, like those, but like a cheese, sorry, nut cheeses. That's what I was thinking about. Like they have so many brands now where you can buy things that are dairy-free, but not in the way that we grew up with them, but the dairy-free options that they have now. You're going to bump into those there. You may bump into some fresh breads, tortillas, etc., stuff like that. So really what you are looking at is building a bunch of fresh produce in, hitting up some nuts and seeds, doing what you need to do in your dairy aisle that's appropriate for your family. Likely around the corner, you're going to start seeing butcher, deli, fresh meats, things like that. So you can grab your meats. If you're buying fresh meat from the deli, there's no ingredient list to look at. So there should be no fillers. Now, if you're buying just ground beef, you're buying ground beef. If you're buying ground chicken, you're buying ground chicken. Where you need to start paying attention is if you are buying like a, oh gosh, what is that called? Like chicken cordon bleu comes to mind, where they're like pounding down chicken and then they're like rolling it around kind of a stuffing or rolling it around a mixture. You're going to want to look for flour there. You're going to find gluten in those items. And so just ask the butcher, ask the person in charge of the deli, where your gluten-free items are. Okay. If that's a concern for you, they are particularly in the natural food world, like a Whole Foods, Trader Joe's doesn't necessarily have a meat deli, but, like your natural foods co-ops, they're quite lovely to talk with and ask specific questions of, and are very, very helpful. Once you move through your meat aisle, you're going to come to like your bakery goods. Okay. So for the most part, you'll need to avoid that unless you are at, like Target probably won't have, where they have their fresh buns and fresh bread. They probably won't have like a fresh gluten-free bread. Now, again, like a Whole Foods or a natural foods co-op, they'll have some gluten-free options for you there. I mean, my kids know exactly where to go to find the fresh gluten-free cookie and the fresh gluten-free muffin, sometimes a fresh gluten-free bread even as well. So that feels like kind of a treat. If there's a deli set up, like a hot bar or even a cold bar, even they have like, you can buy pizza by the slice and get smoothies and things like that. So things should be labeled pretty clearly, gluten-free, and what your options are there. But again, ask the staff. Now, most deli bars, whether it's cold or hot, will have some kind of list of what is being served. And if recently this happened at our local co-op, I can't remember what the dish was, but I was like, why is there flour in there? I can't remember what it was, but I was so dumbfounded, and I thought maybe it was like a misprint. And so I went back and I just asked the deli person, I said, I just have to be clear, I'm really sorry to bother you. Is this actually correct? And he looked at it, he was like, this is so silly. He was like, no, this dish normally doesn't have wheat in it at all, but we had a leftover blah, blah, blah dish that we added into the mixture. And so it was just because of a different recipe that day's lineup of ingredients for that particular casserole or whatever it was had wheat in it. So ask. It just never really hurts to ask. So then you're going to get to like your beverages, and whatnot. So you'll notice that what I just did was I walked you around the perimeter of a grocery store. And what did we avoid? We avoided like the 5 or 6 rows in between that house all the packaged, refined, and processed foods, none of which need to have a place in your grocery cart. You may want to find a place in your grocery cart for those items. And I'm not going to lie. I mean, there are certain things we get in each of those rows. But again, you can find the crackers that are gluten-free. If you're a cereal family, you can find gluten-free cereal options. And remember being little and going grocery shopping with your mom and pulling everything off of the aisle and tucking it under the cart and behind the cart and like over the cart. And then her checking out and being like, why is the bill $300? Or why is it whatever it was, right? And like, what is this? And I didn't put that in there. And you guys, and you need to ask first. I remember there were so many of us climbing on the grocery carts. Mom, I don't know if you're watching this, but like we literally tipped over a full grocery cart one time in the middle of the store. And it was just a yard. We had stuff rolling everywhere. I was embarrassed, and I was probably, the one who made that happen. I say that just because we've all been there, done that. And it's like, how did this thing get into your grocery cart? So when I'm working with moms and they're talking about whatever, if it's junk food or food with gluten or whatever in their pantry, and they're frustrated by it, I just have to say like, well, Mom, who put it there? Who allowed it in the grocery cart, or who allowed it to pass by them when they were checking out at the store, or who like acknowledge that they're taking it out of the grocery bag and putting it on the shelf. So it's not to make you wrong for where you are. It's just to start making you aware of those spaces in which you start to wake up when you're making lifestyle changes, such as food. Baby steps and practice and just becoming aware. And then it will soon become second nature to you. And then you'll still stumble into things along the road, but you'll just, face palm, and then you'll just move on. Okay, so that's just kind of the quick, like how to shop and where to shop. And so that's how you can see that literally any grocery store has fresh produce, fresh meats, and, whole milk fat plain yogurt. So even when you are out in Timbuktu, you know that you can make meals from that food that is gluten-free for your family. Okay, so you can kind of just rest assured. And then where you really want to pay attention on those days is your sauces and your dips, because always you will find wheat as thickeners, thickening agents in those as well. Like soy sauce. It took me forever to remember that there is stinking wheat in soy sauce. And then I had to go to tamari, and then I had to move out of tamari if I wanted to like avoid the soy. So you just sort of start to notice, and you go from good to a little better to best to even better, right? Down the road. So those are small changes that you can make. Saving money, eating gluten-free. So that was really a thing for us. I mean, budget obviously still is a thing, but when it was just the four of us, when the girls were really little and I was, we were strapped, it was really tricky to make this happen. So that's when I would dabble with buying in the bulk section, whatever you can at whatever store is available, like Trader Joe's and Fresh Thyme. Fresh Thyme is a great store. They all have, Trader Joe's doesn't have a bulk section. Fresh Thyme has a bulk section. Coburn's has a bulk section. And Cub has a bulk section, right? And so bulk can mean different things at different times. I don't mean like necessarily Costco where you buy 48 rolls of toilet paper bulk. Like buying bulk just means they have a bulk section where there are different containers for different foods, and you get a bag or you bring your own and you fill it up and you weigh it. So you're not paying for the marketing, you're not paying for the packaging of that food. So generally that food per pound is cheaper. Okay, so that's what I mean by bulk. So buying in bulk in that way is helpful. Now, the other term, buying in bulk, i.e. a big box store like Sam's Club or Costco, really, really, really helpful if you can use your budget in that way. Those stores tend to be like, I walk in, they're like Target. Like I only had a few things on my, list, and then you walk out with 4 grocery, carts full. So being really mindful about what you're getting, sticking to your budget, knowing where you're going to kind of mix and match. Like maybe you wanted 2 or 3 of these because you go through them faster, but that day you find, as Costco is so good at doing, they're seasonal, right? So maybe they bring out that thing that you love so much. Okay, the kids saw it, they want one. So maybe put 1 or 2 of these back, just get one of these and one of those. So just be mindful about your budget in that way. And those stores are doing such a great job about finding not only gluten, but offering like that grain-free, paleo, dairy-free, options. They have some vegetarian options if that's your choice. So really, really a lot of resources that way. I know even on our blog, I've, have lists of like, here's what I buy at Costco, or, here's what I buy at Thrive Market, because I think sometimes it's helpful to just kind of have a template or a model to work from and then build off of that for yourself. The other bulk conversation would be like recently we were talking about how to source whole foods, and we were talking a lot about meat. So things like meat and eggs, if you want to go, source direct right to the farmer, it's a very empowering relationship to have. It's a really fun conversation to have. It's a really neat opportunity to introduce your kids to where their food comes from, right? And often it's far more inexpensive, but it is an upfront investment in your health, if you want to look at it that way. So you might buy an eighth of a cow or a quarter of a cow, or you might maybe they have like family packs of of meats put together that you can just buy like that. That's a good way to shop as well. Also, I bet Cub does this, but I know like our Natural Foods Co-op does this, where they'll put together like 3-pound packages of, say, like ground beef or something like that, or they'll do like a big family pack of chicken breast. And I recently did that. I want to say I paid, I don't remember, it was like, I don't know, maybe it was around $30. I can't remember what it was, but I was like, I don't know how many chicken breasts are in there. They're kind of floating in water. I can't see. But when I came home, it was enough for something like 20, I think it was like 24 chicken breasts, and they were nice sized chicken breasts, even from the co-op. And so I was like, that was a score. It was huge. So I just froze them in 2 to 4 chicken breasts at a time. So I could just pull them out as needed. And that was just a huge godsend. So that is going to be cheaper than buying like your organic packages of chicken one by one as you go there. But then I had to look that week, like, can I put, $35 into this, or did I need to put that in somewhere else? So that's something to think about. And then lastly, before we go, a money saving tip that I have really discovered is, for years we did our baking gluten-free. So first of all, it was cheaper to buy the gluten-free flours than it was to buy this bag of waffle mix, this bag of brownie mix, this bag of cookie mix, this bag of pizza crust mix. Now they're tasty, but often you don't have control of ingredients, particularly if you have a restriction of some sort for a family member, and you need to be more particular about that. You want to go more homemade. If you have kids, like our girls always loved to bake, so it was something that I enjoyed doing and enjoyed sharing with them. And it really just provided us with a million memories that are so awesome to have. What I've just discovered over the years, though, is that gluten-free baking came with so many different flours and then these different binders. And I was often frustrated, not only with the taste, but also with the texture. And then kind of enter the world of grain-free baking. That, for me, is really where it's at. Maybe it's an equal investment. There are so many more grain-free options than even there were before, but your basics are covered if you've got coconut flour, either one of tapioca or arrowroot starch, because so far in just about every recipe I've come across, they can be interchangeable. Or almond flour. So that's having 3 or 4 flours in your pantry, and either like maple syrup, coconut sugar, or honey for your baking, and your baking powder, baking soda, but you already have that, your little bit of sea salt, and they're quite versatile. And the texture is just a little bit different, but I find they might not rise as much or be quite as fluffy, but they're more nutrient dense. You need less of it to be full. And I have just found that to be a better, go for our dollar, like a better stretch for our dollar on that. So gluten-free, healthy, and easy. Really just keep in mind, simple and fresh. If you have meat in your freezer and you have veggies in your refrigerator, you have yourself a meal. If you happen to have some jasmine rice in your pantry, or even some gluten-free pasta, really, really great, right? There are so many pastas and breads and things that you can buy gluten-free. It's a much, much easier transition than it used to be. Some grocery stores even have a gluten-free guide. I know Trader Joe's does. I think Fresh Thyme does as well. So that can be a really helpful thing when you are embarking on that journey for the first time. Give yourself some grace, give yourself some time, find kind of what is the most important place for you to start in terms of baby steps. Does your family love a big breakfast? So maybe that's where you start. You start looking at how can I have a gluten-free breakfast, and then leave lunch and dinner just the way they always were. And once you get that breakfast mastered, whether it's muffins and smoothie, whether it's a hot cereal, whether it's a, egg bake. I mean, where I grew up, egg bake, that had breadcrumbs in it, or it had chunks of bread in it. I don't think I've ever made an egg bake with any kind of grain in it. So it just is what you learn to kind of recreate. That's one of the things actually that I love to do the most. I just have such a great time when someone's like, this is my favorite recipe. I have no idea how to recreate it. That is like, I will take on that challenge. It's so fun to do. And it's really fun to find out on the other end of it, like, I can make a great mac and cheese. It doesn't have any cow dairy in it. It doesn't have any grains in it. And at the end of the day, everybody's satisfied. We get our comfort food. It's delicious. It's full of protein. It's full of healthy fats. It's awesome, right? So you're going to start small, baby steps in. So to wrap up, we talked about what to look for in terms of gluten-free. We talked about where to shop. I shared with you how to shop the perimeter of the grocery store. We went over briefly some money-saving tips and just the start small. So much to say on this topic. Elaine, did we have any questions come through? No? Okay, great. All right. Thanks for signing on. I'll see you later.